This is Illiterate. My name is Evan.
My name is Taylor. I read some stuff this week.
I watched a movie. This week we are covering In the Heights. That's right, Lin-Manuel Miranda is back at it again. And right off the top of it, we'll get to it late in the show, but man, it has been caught up in some scandal. And so we are here to undress the monster here. We are going to go into the history of musicals, where In the Heights came from.
Seems like it's on the back of Hamilton, which we did an episode on.
Absolutely.
And Lin-Manuel Miranda shooting through the stratosphere. But this has taken 13 years in development to be made, including an extra 8 if you want to count the real first draft, which we'll get into. But God, that's also part of it too. It's like,
like this is it's like it's comprised in different. 13 years is a long time, over a decade. My God,
plus another 8. Yeah, just way before Hamilton and any of that stuff. The Broadway show came out in 2008. We might also get into more questions than answers, so feel free to reach out to us at ILLITERATE-POD.
We're curious about this. This is a conundrum, and we want to leave you with some questions at the end. So please get back in touch with us if you're into it.
Because it won 4 Tony Awards, including Best Musical. So the musical, magnificent. Musical film,
different ball game. Yeah.
Here's the question: why Lin-Manuel Miranda did the musical straight off the bat? He grew up in Washington Heights. So here it is, Washington Heights. He's in it. He's not some random person. It's where he lived. And he said, quote, music comes out of every corner. He had a very musical family, including musicals. His dad was in the fan club for real Broadway musicals. So he heard all sorts of music. This is why he's interested in this as a medium.
Very good.
And then Washington Heights as a place. Interestingly, I saw just recently, because of this film, New York City is having a campaign to promote different places featured in the film and sort of a tourist angle on it. But of course, residents are worried about gentrification because it is one of, if not the cheapest neighborhoods of Manhattan.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
So people are worried about that.
Yeah.
As it...
No, don't tell everybody about it.
Yeah, great. Look at it. People are singing in the streets. 1.5 miles square or 4.2 square kilometers.
Wow.
Pretty small space. 151,000 people in just that small area. And then some famous people that are also from there. Cardi B is from there. Okay. And then on the acting side, Lawrence Fishburne.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. Up there. Yeah. And of course, Lin-Manuel Miranda. So the prominent thing in the film is Latinx population primarily in this borough. I looked into the history of that because I'm always curious about, well, what caused this to be? So a couple things I could see. Basically, by 1970, native Spanish speakers were the majority group there. And a big thing that happened in the 60s was the Dominican Civil War in the Dominican Republic. So there was a lot of economically motivated movement, but people are still culturally attached to the DR, and they would send money home and eventually want to retire back to the island, which then becomes a facet of the film. Coupled with, in the 60s, the Immigration Act of 1965, signed by the U.S., there was a bunch of restrictions and preferences that were considered racially discriminatory against people that weren't from Northwestern Europe.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of those things got removed in terms of quotas and caps and amounts of people from different places. So that became the reason historically. Here, Lin-Manuel Miranda is living in this place. He goes to school at Wesleyan, which I think we mentioned. We didn't mention him as much in Hamilton, in our Hamilton episode, so this is going to be a little bit about him and his journey and the earliest thing. And I love talking about this stuff as it goes on to, God, this thing changed, like things change so much. And if you look at a piece of work, I just listened to a podcast about the song Hallelujah.
Yeah.
And how much it changed Leonard Cohen's thing. It was like 5 different things and then 20, and he had 500 different verses. Like it's so much changing and adaptation.
It goes through a metamorphosis. Absolutely.
Yes.
And we have to remember that it is a process. These things don't just come out fully formed and perfect. It really, people pour over this stuff and tinker on it and tweak it. And that's how they just little adjustments.
So that will come out in here, and maybe we can see how that some of that adapting to the movie alters the content of it and the tone and whatnot. So he wrote the earliest draft in 1999 during his sophomore year of college. He's a little baby boy. And was accepted by Wesleyan's theater company to do for a weekend. So they're like, yeah, you can do it in the spring for 3 days. You can have your performance. But he only had one song written. Okay. So he worked on it nonstop during winter break. And like I said, played for 3 days in 2000 as an 80-minute one-act show called In the Heights.
Wow.
And so essentially that's what I, read as a piece of literature. I couldn't find all of it, but I did find a lot about it and what actually went into it. So we'll get into some of that.
It's one of the rare ones where the source isn't exactly published and out there and fully available, I guess.
Right. It was he did it for 3 days.
Yeah.
In college. It's not out there. The musical influences I thought were interesting. Ruben Blades and then Juan Luis Guerra. He had this amazing salsa song. Translated, the title is If We Had Oil Here, which asks, if we had oil in the Dominican Republic, how rich would we be and what would we do with the money? Which is a direct, that song 96,000, which is what would we do if we won the lottery?
Right. Okay.
So it's pulling from that too. It's kind of tragic and happy and strange to hear that, but he's pulling that from a salsa song that he listened to as a kid.
Very interesting.
And then I also saw, he said Big Pun, who was the first Puerto Rican rapper to go platinum. I'll post a link to a compilation of his songs. The cadence, the technical rap and internal rhyme schemes that he uses, it sounds a lot. All I know is Hamilton, but it sounds a lot
like
like the rapping of Hamilton. So,
I mean, man, the second it starts, you go, yeah, this is that. This is Lin-Manuel. That here it all is. Here's the team.
Yeah, but I loved finding a Puerto Rican rapper who he said he was inspired by. And it's like, oh yeah, the technicality and the way that it rhymes and the cadence of it is very similar.
I love that.
Click on that link if you're interested in that. As far as actual musicals, not just music, Rent was a huge influence. Obviously, Bohemian artists in the East Village. Rent came out in 96 on Broadway, and Lin-Manuel is like, oh, you can do a story about your life. Like, it doesn't have to be some fantastical thing. So, and then the other thing he wanted to go against, it's not like West Side Story, which was one of the only few high-profile musicals to feature Puerto Rican characters.
But it centers around a gang.
And they're holding knives to people. Yeah, it's the exact opposite.
We got that one. That is not everybody's experience, nor is it the majority of people's experience.
Right, that's what he said. Yeah, he said, Washington Heights, most people are not involved in crime or drugs. It's inauthentic for me to write about drug deals and domestic abuse. That's not. And it's funny because not funny, but it's interesting that a few of the reviews I saw for early shows after it was in tryouts and then off Broadway, they mention, oh, there's no crime or drugs in this. And it's like, well, yeah, that's not what why is that the case? So there's like an inherent racism in the early reviews of why doesn't it have this?
Because it doesn't exist in Washington Heights, because it's about a real place.
Yeah, and his experience, and so that's what it is. So he's countering
it's not West Side Story.
Yeah, with a very uplifting, upbeat, still people's problems, but his real life experience. So just this 3-day thing broke box office records for the school's theater that year. Oh, cool! Yeah. And then there were seniors at the school that saw it and said, hey, we want to help you make this into a Broadway show after graduation. But remember, he's a sophomore. So he's like, okay, sure thing, and then forgets about it. They are telling the truth. 2 years later, they come back to him. 2 seniors and some other alumni approach him and say, hey, remember, we want to do your thing to get it eventually to Broadway. Yeah. So this is in 2002. He works with the director, Thomas Kail, who then also was the director for Hamilton. So this becomes his cadre of people that he ends up working with. So now it's changing because it was an 80-minute one-act thing. So he's writing 5 different drafts of this while teaching 7th grade English at his old high school during the day. He didn't go straight into immediate Broadway success. He's a high school teacher. And then Chiara Alegria Hudes joined the team in 2004 for the book, which is the script, the dialogue, the stage direction, not the music and lyrics. So she's added on. I teased it, but the differences from the one act to what people saw on Broadway, the big featured story was a love triangle, which does not appear at all in the off-Broadway or Broadway production. So the story behind this is based on personal experiences. Lin, one of his best friends since kindergarten, came out to him the summer before they both separated and went off to college.
Oh, wow.
And so this was a big part of him and understanding relationships. And so this is a character called Lincoln, which doesn't appear, like I said, but it's in the one act thing. And Benny, who is the black character prominently featured in the script, and Nina have their romance, and Lincoln is in love with Benny, his best friend. So this is the primary story and situation of the 80-minute original thing.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. I was fascinated to find Usnavi, who is the main character, basically, is just a side character who ran the bodega. He doesn't feature prominently in the original thing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
This is blowing my mind, man, because I haven't even gotten, I have a lot of thoughts about the movie, and this is really answering a lot of what I was really caught up with it. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but this is really interesting.
Yeah.
The Lincoln character sounds incredible, and I want to come back to that.
Yeah. So that led me to say, okay, well then why get rid of that? If that's the plot of the 80-minute thing. Yeah. So you have to look at what's around it. And they also said in an interview, Thomas Kell and Lin-Manuel, that Avenue Q, huge Broadway production, had come out in 2003. Remember, they're working on this from 2002 into 2004 and so on. And it has that as a huge plot point. And they said, they're doing this way better. There's a character who's closeted and is in love with their best friend. That's a whole subplot of that musical. And so they said, well, we don't want to do exactly what this musical is doing that has just come out. So that's why they updated it and got rid of it and made Usnavi the main character.
That's fascinating. And it's a bit of a shame because it could have been a huge breath of fresh air for this.
If it tracked from the inception of it to this modern film or bringing it back in. So Usnavi becomes the main character, originally played by Lin-Manuel Miranda. Abuela Claudia gets added also. She wasn't in the original 80-minute thing. And this is based on a Puerto Rican woman who helped raise Lin and his sister. And loved gambling and slot machines and whatnot. And so she's involved now. He said that he's written over 50 songs for the show. So it's almost a completely different thing by this point.
Very interesting.
By 2005, they're having the tryout, the off-Broadway thing for a few months in 2007, and then it goes to Broadway in 2008. Again, talking about some of the conflicting things, talking about West Side Story. As they're bringing it to Broadway, there are Broadway producers who are struggling with the pitch to put this on. They wanted Nina to have more of a dramatic reason for leaving school than the pressures of being the first in the family to go. And literally all real pitches, Lin said, they said, why isn't she pregnant? Why isn't she in a gang? Why isn't she coming out of an abusive relationship? Like, these are all the things that people are saying. And he's like, no, I don't want these to be the conflicts that are always represented.
It's like, I'm okay if we wanted to have another, more of a reason. Valid. But wow, there is more to people's lives than that is disheartening in all sorts of ways.
But they stuck to their guns and they didn't change any of that with all the stuff they changed to put it on Broadway. Over 1,000 performances closed in 2011 and so many tours outside of the U.S., Panama, Brazil, the United Kingdom. Fascinating to me, Japan. And I read, and I'll post a link to an article about this because they sing it in Japanese. It's all Japanese actors. But it's about Washington Heights and a Hispanic community
that
primarily there. But they say they do it justice because it's about the energy and the heart. And it's like, how would you bring this to an audience to understand unless it's in Japanese?
Well, I off of our Godzilla episode, I'm like, because their culture, they dig into it, man, and they appreciate things, and they throw their twist on it and they throw it back out into the world. I'm into it. After the Godzilla episode, I'm like, hey, absolutely.
And then similarly in South Korea, K-pop and hip hop stars were involved in the cast as well. So that was super interesting. Here comes the film production process. So November of 2008, the Broadway show started the exact same year. Universal gets the rights and they say, we're going to release it in 2011. Kiara's going to write the screenplay. She wrote the book for it.
Obama's president. We're making this, y'all, new world.
Universal canceled it, though. The situation was they said they were looking for a bankable star like Shakira or J-Lo instead of unknowns. And that's Test International, Lin said, is the phrase heard over and over again. Oh, who is going to bring in equitable to what we're spending?
What person in what role brings up a certain percentage that will make this viable?
So that's very disheartening to the process, because it's like, well, that's how you get good people, is you get people that people don't know, or, well, nobody's done this before, so how
exactly we can't
people
get somebody who's been in everything to do the thing that's never been done before, because then it's like all the other things.
So I found interviews and stuff where Lin is like, yeah, they're making it into a movie, and then other times he's like, I'm not saying anything until I'm on the set, because it just seemed like this big, huge burst. This is his first big thing out of school, and then they're going to make it into a movie, etc. So here comes an interweaving of our other episode. In the meantime, Lin goes on vacation, reads a bio of Alexander Hamilton. Boom, boom, boom. Here we are. This opened.
Well, I could mess around with this.
Yeah. And then that came out in 2016. In the Heights is still in the ether.
Development.
But here comes Hamilton on Broadway. Good Lord. He's doing great. So then in 2016, another film production. Another film production company gets it. John Chu is set to direct. Unfortunately, it's the Weinstein Company. And so the very next year, Chiara says, we got to take this elsewhere. They get the rights back because they're like, we can't work with these people. Also, in the meantime of her not working on this, she won the 2012 drama Pulitzer Prize for her play Water by the Spoonful.
No way.
So she's doing just as well outside of this thing not being turned into a film. Right. So Warner Brothers woos them, which never happens, where the studio sets up everything. You got to pitch to 95 people and get rejected. But they created a whole big shebang and built a bodega on their back lot and did all this nonsense. So they got it in 2018, and then it was supposed to be released in 2020. Lo and behold, a year later. Right. So here comes kind of what you teased at the beginning. Here's just my little piece of it. In terms of the film world, Hispanics and Latinos accounted for 29% of tickets sold last year, and they represent 18.5% of the U.S. population. But they are only in 4% of film roles represented. So that's sort of the setup for, okay, now here's this film and here's why it makes sense. And here's some of the backlash that it's been getting, or some of the problems with it as people see it.
One of the most shocking things that has happened in the wake of this being released is it has been embroiled in a colorism scandal. It's completely taken the focus of their press junkets. People are saying that the film, which is set in Washington Heights, which has a population that's nearing 50% or more Black population, to which that's not represented in the lead cast. And then they're saying that within that lead cast, nearly uniformly, they look to be cast as white passing Latina, more light skinned. I was concerned with the color grade because I've honestly never seen most of these people, just a press photo of somebody on the red carpet. So I don't know what most of these people look like in real life. I do know the process of filmmaking and what a film like this goes through in finishing, and the color grade that they put on this to adjust everything so that everything looks uniform and it evokes a certain tone and feel. It's really touchy. And looking at the film myself, there are some white people presented in the film, and when they are confronted with this Latina main character cast, they do look bridging on indistinguishable, which is
troubling.
It's very troubling. But it might not be as straightforward as they picked them because they have light skin color. They might not, actually, and this might lay more in the post-production process and the color that this film has put on it. So I'm really, really touchy to say, what's going on here, what the problem is. Lin-Manuel and much of the people involved have been trying to make up for this and apologize for this, but it has really exploded out of nowhere. This is the most shocking thing dropped on it. We set this on the schedule a long time ago, and we thought, oh, this is a home run, and this would be a delight to cover, nothing controversial, and this has exploded onto them this week. I mean, it's worth talking about, but when it comes to us, we don't have the answers here, but what we can do is try to lay out exactly what the conversation that is happening in the public eye, what that is, and try to, if you've heard a colorist, what's wrong, I hope that I lend to you some very specific insight as to what the conversation is.
And I'll throw out some differences that I found from the film to the musical on Broadway.
Yeah.
Not the original 80-minute thing, but I did see some of the things that they cut. Not that this lends to white washing, color grading, any of that stuff, but just some topic pieces that they changed that are interesting that might have enhanced certain tonal qualities to the story itself. So Nina and Benny's relationship, Benny is the only primary black main character in the cast. In the original Broadway show, their relationship is blocked by her father's racism, which is a huge piece that he has to get over.
Right.
The father, that is, and accomplish. And so that becomes a big part. And you had said off mic that it's kind of a like he's not important, but it is more off to the side, and it has to do more with her schooling. And,
yes, it's more centered around Nina than him.
Right. And so that to me seems like a very interesting, nuanced plot device to say, oh, here's this guy who is also racist.
Right.
Is very interesting.
And had that to confront that in the film. There's another path there that's very interesting. This is, and then I'm thinking of the Lincoln character again, bringing back the one who's in love with his best friend. It's just this is texture that has less to do with socioeconomic problems and more about real interpersonal drama and being in a place and time with certain people.
So another facet of that with this relationship, Nina's mother, who is dead in the film, features prominently as a part of this whole family dynamic in the original musical. She's the peacemaker of the family. But like I said, she's removed entirely. She has a song in the musical called Enough about this issue with her husband and whatnot. And she's this strong female character who is holding the family together.
Oh my God, yeah.
So all of that is gone, as well as 5 other songs. Of course, they have to cut things down for time. The film is already...
Sure, yeah, it is long. It is 2.5 hours, yeah.
Yeah, so that's interesting to me, those pieces to cut. And then the script as well, this might not be true, but they said...
We'll delve into the scandalous for the moment, if you dare.
As counting it, and I could imagine this, fewer than 10 lines from the Broadway script made it into the film. Because they have to add plot, they have to add what works in the film.
And as we covered with Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, I don't know that actually being so, precious with the source material necessarily does you favors, but it's a process of understanding what serves your purpose and what doesn't. What I commend this whole process for is it seeming to be such a fertile groundwork that it's just idea after idea. Take this out, put this. It's like, that's not nothing, man. That's really fascinating. But at a certain point over this 20-year process, my God, realizing this is a 20-year process of development to get us all the way up to this movie, that in this time and the hands that it's gone through, I'm wondering where it really wanted to lay its point down.
Yeah. So that made me looking into musical films in general, because obviously in the Broadway performance, there's no surreal dream type stuff. There's no crazy wheeling in a pool into the theater. They're not dancing on the walls. That's none of that is what's happening.
Sure,
but clearly that is added for a magical musical element to the film. The only other thing we've talked about is Hamilton, which was basically a filmed stage production. It wasn't really a musical film.
Right.
I did look back, actually. I'm sorry. There's another one. We did talk about Cats.
Yes.
But that also did not do it well and was critically
That was another one. Was
hated.
like, well, what went wrong in this situation,
Yeah. So I wanted to see, what is this film pulling from?
Yeah.
I found quite a few influences, and specifically, since we talk about adaptation all the time.
Yes.
What is the tone of this stuff? What is this supposed to be? What was it? If you're ready, we'll jump right in, starting from the very beginning of film. The jazz singer, if you're a film fiend, that's always thrown around because that was the first feature-length talkie with sound.
Yeah.
And that came out in 1927. It also had 7 songs with it.
Wow.
The state of theaters, patrons were so used to seeing with live music, you'd have kind of like a stage theater, like a pit with an orchestra in the bottom playing music over top of the thing. So a lot of theaters showed it as a silent film because they didn't have they didn't have sound.
Oh man, we've all maybe you've been through some sort of technological advance and the antiquated like awkwardness between those steps. Like think about it back then. That's kind of funny.
So
what's a speaker? Don't need it. I'm not paying for that.
Get a violinist. Yeah, they're cheaper. Yeah. through the next decade following the Great Depression, many theaters closed, the live performance theaters, and vaudeville stars went to Hollywood because it was on an entirely different financial scale. Money, money, money. The same movie, thousands of quote unquote stages, like, God, how do you have a traveling troupe and they do 1,000 performances in 4 years? But like, oh, you can do 1,000 performances of this movie today at 7 p.m. So good Lord, let's get people into the theaters.
Start it again.
Yeah. So the musical component comes with the musicians and composers. So there's a famous theater composer, George Cohen, who wrote, ironically, Give My Regards to Broadway. If you've ever heard that song. He had 40 films that he worked on with songs during the Depression and only 6 stage shows. Oh, wow. So he made the complete flip during this time. As well as, think about his numbers, just in gross, the number of films explode. So just for the year 1930, there were 100 musical films made.
Whoa.
Comparing that to the closest, biggest time we have, the year 2016, which was when La La Land came out, that was one of 4 that came out that year. My God, so many musical films coming out, which essentially are kind of stage, they're filming.
Yes, it's very early. This starts in a room with the camera seeing the whole room, and it's drawn in by the choreography and the intricacies of all of that. And then as the medium progressed, we got closer, and we started cutting, and we started having big, drawn out shots that brought us into other locations. So you saw that progress with the film, with cinema.
Oh yes, and so that's the number one thing that propels the musical film medium, because good Lord, people are getting tired films. So they gotta update the cinematic component of it, as you said, is untapped. This leads to dance being the primary revolution for these films. And so here comes influence number 1, the pool number in The Heights. They actually, and this is being shown, it's in the trailer, it's in everywhere.
Yeah. It is their big location piece. It is the location of the movie.
Filmed in Washington Heights. That pool, found connection to one of our other episodes, bizarrely, was part of, in the 1930s, Robert Moses's construction mania during the rise of New York. We talked about him in Motherless Brooklyn.
Yes, Motherless Brooklyn. We just put that back out. Please go listen to it if you didn't.
Yeah, but so he's responsible for the pool that they're using.
No
in the
way.
Heights.
Oh my gosh.
Bizarre.
Oh man.
Weird person.
Yeah, it's weird to understand how that stuff moves.
Yeah. But now it's being used for this. So what this whole big pool number is inspired by is this guy, Busby Berkeley, who choreographed at least 30 films, mostly in the 1930s. This master choreographer, because that's the whole thing. It's all synchronized. Yeah. It's 500 people. So they're pulling from him. Just a little bit about him to make some context make sense. I thought, just interestingly, as a piece of trivia, the name on his birth certificate is blank. So Busby was a nickname. He has no name.
That sounds like something cool you say to intimidate somebody.
Yeah. He served in World War I as a field artillery lieutenant, drilling 1,200 soldiers in field choreography, mass movements on the battlefield. So he is precise. He is epic. He is on point. So this is his claim to fame, is these complex, insane geometric patterns, kaleidoscopic performances of these showgirls, especially, and this is the big change, is viewed from above. And I'll put, it's the classic.
I got you. Yeah.
If you can picture the big swimming pool, the girls jumping in one by one, like that's been duplicated and parodied a million times. I'll post a link in the show notes to this epic YouTube video where they show all the things he did with this style, just insanely synchronized.
Touching on a recent reference for that, a sequence from the 30s, from one of these things is not recreated exactly, but it's pulled to recreate in the Coen brothers, one of their recent films, Hail Caesar. You get to see the set of exactly one of these sequences, how it was done, the intricacies, and how even banal it could look off camera. It's very interesting. Hail Caesar's really cool for that background, old Hollywood look. But if you're interested in this kind of synchronization, this move from musicals, dance, swimming, all
that's what that film is about.
This sequence speaks to this guy and his style 100%.
Yeah, he's amazing. Horrible life. I won't get into it, but when it comes to this stuff, he's the master of it, and people are copying him. And this is what film is for, to show this epic, insane cinematic dance numbers. The second thing to propel the medium, the competition from RKO films, is their chemistry of their performers that we all know and love. Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers, the dancers, who then become film stars because they were in vaudeville. People saw them. People knew them. Now here comes In the Heights, one of their influences, where I think it's in the trailers and stuff, but they go into, in this love song, dancing on the side of this building on the fire escape. So Fred Astaire in the film Royal Wedding, I'll post a link to the video so you can see it, but he's dancing around because he finally falls in love and this girl loves dance, and then he starts dancing on the wall of this room, and then he starts dancing on the ceiling.
Yep.
The video shows it's like they rotated it, like the rotating set, like an Inception, where they had the hallway that spun around and they were going all over the place. They did this at the time. It's super awesome, but they're definitely directly pulling from this other classic musical film.
No, I have other problems with that sequence.
We can get into that if you want.
Oh, I don't want to nitpick it. It's like the focus of the shot is this background and how beautiful this all is, which then leads into that sequence of them dancing on the side of the building, which I understand, massive, huge effects, sets. It's got to be green screen in the background, no problem. The problem is I really, from a filmmaking standpoint, disagree. I think they break their immersion by not being in the real place for the setup shot.
Yeah. So here comes, some of the tonal stuff.
Yeah, I hate to get too in particular about what I like and don't like about a filmmaking process, but I think that this film has other authenticity problem in ways that I just don't agree with. So sometimes I'm really hesitant to put this stuff out there, but in this case, I felt like that they could have really worked in real immersion with having the setup shot, the first shot of the Brooklyn Bridge, her off the thing, for it to be the real thing. And because it was a fake immediately. So I don't know. I do.
It does bring into question, like you're saying, the tonal stuff. What is a musical film supposed to be? Because film, as it's growing, we'll see the rise, fall, rise potentially again. Wizard of Oz keeps it going in 39, epic, outside the bounds of a stage, clearly fantastical. And then into the 40s and 50s, we get adaptations of Broadway as well as originals, Singing in the Rain, which ironically, a big part of the plot is about adapting to the talkies. Right, and then they say, we're going to switch it to a musical, which is hilarious because no one would do that today.
No
saying,
ever. No.
Yeah, our quiet, dramatic film isn't working. Let's add some songs and dance.
Then it's like that's supposed to clue into the audience is like maybe they're a little desperate and they need to like change it up. It's like that, like nobody would get that now because it'd be like, well, why?
We talked about this in 2 weeks ago's episode. Animation is following suit. Disney's doing the musicals. Sleeping Beauty comes out in 59, and then they started to, decline, and that's where you have 101 Dalmatians, which didn't have any songs. So,
very interesting.
Yeah, similarly, the studio system is going into decline. Like we talked about with Singing in the Rain, they realize, like, oh God, where are musicals fitting in? Because there is an emphasis on realism. Yeah. And West Side Story barely ekes out in 61 as an adaptation to film. But in this time, the Beatles have their weird musical film documentaries into the 70s and 80s, of course, over generalizing, but there's some memorable films with music in them. Footloose, Dirty Dancing,
right. But
for the time
far
period,
and away removed from the kind of synchronization, pool swimming, that kind of old Hollywood stuff.
So clearly, the studios need a new approach before it dies out completely. But lo and behold, who comes back? Animation in the 90s. Right. Disney is back on it and basically copies the style of the 1930s and 40s musicals. Like, I didn't even really think about this, but in The Lion King, Just Can't Wait to Be King, that's Busby Berkeley, the kaleidoscopic, feathers and all of that stuff. They're pulling from it completely. So the adaptation goes the other way. And now Lion King is on Broadway, running for over 2 decades, which I think is fascinating. Yeah. I wanted to bring in one piece because we're talking about the rise, fall, and rise, and we tend to just veer towards America since that's where Evan and I are from. But we cannot forget Bollywood, which never stopped.
We would be remiss. Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
They have never stopped practicing. This has been their bread and butter, man. And nobody, I've seen some of these movies and I forget that that's man, that is what they do.
90% of all Bollywood films are musicals.
Yeah.
They
have the tools, man, and they have been practicing forever. They have mastered it.
And as we go into the modern era, Baz Luhrmann, who did Moulin Rouge, which is known as kind of either the revitalization or it really hits all the marks for
Right.
fans of this. He said he was hugely inspired by Bollywood. He said
Yeah.
about that style, he likes cinema where the audience participates in the movie, where they know they're watching a movie at all times. That's what he said. So, and I 100% agree. So I kind of had to look into, because this is not in my wheelhouse, and this is opinion and conjecture for some reasons why Bollywood continues with this genre and pattern of filmmaking.
Yeah.
One of the big ones I saw, which makes sense to me and I didn't think about, public obscenity and intimacy portrayed in public is very much frowned upon culturally. Mm-hmm. So using songs to compensate for those intimate scenes becomes the language of filmmaking in Bollywood.
So it's like the idea of a placeholder for a love scene.
Yes. Or getting to know some. Yeah. It's so
then
so
you
that's,
start speaking in code, and now it's art.
yeah, exactly. And then that just carries over culturally forever.
I love it.
To now. A big part also, music creating an alternate revenue stream, releasing the song early. Even if a movie is low rated, if the song's a hit, then the movie's going to do well because people are going to it for the songs. Right. And then those songs that are in the movies, it kind of goes the other way. Somebody will have a popular song in America and then you hear it in a movie. But this is the other way, where people take songs from movies and they incorporate them into their life. So these love songs become wedding songs, dance numbers in clubs. Like, it becomes part of culture after the film.
Oh my gosh.
And then I think it's just also a cultural difference, whole cloth. Like, the expectation is to have songs in film. And now it has become impossible to separate.
It's really fascinating to me looking at the cultures who run with this kind of thing. You know, like we were perfecting the musical and through the back half of the, the 40s and into the, through the 50s and into the 60s. And we moved away and started figuring out how to make, sci-fi worlds real and action movies work. And that's what sold the tickets for the seats. But it's so interesting to see other cultures latch on to things that they really like, because India, they have latched on not only to the musical genre, but the action genre as well.
Yes.
The movies that India produces are very, very specific, and they are a very abrasive, intense, innovative, flashy as it. I mean, that is the name of the game. And they love these two in particular, types of movies. They just that's what they make all the time. They put hundreds of millions of dollars into it. Bollywood is as Hollywood as you can think it is. It really is. But it's fascinating. And it's kind of like K-pop in that situation where it's like, we moved out of the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC after 2000 and that kind of thing. But that has completely become this new revolution of K-pop, which is now, you have to reckon with it. It's huge. It's bizarre to me to think that this is inspired by a guy who has a bunch of boys contracts under his arm, right? From 1995, so it's very interesting to watch how these cultures take these things and run with them, make them their own. Again, going back to the Godzilla thing, I love seeing how that was batted back and forth between the cultures.
Yeah. That kind of speaks to the tonal question of the 21st century musical films. I think we see darker, more biopics or remakes. You mentioned La La Land, but even that references the golden age of Hollywood, sort of looking backward.
Yes.
Or they have a cast of well-known actors, like in Mamma Mia and Hairspray and whatnot.
Right.
It's interesting. I don't know. This is sort of the question without an answer to our audience of is the modern musical film, is it in the heights, and what does it do right with that tone? If you have to, speak to pertinent social or socio-political issues, or what a film does that a musical doesn't do, are there musical films that are dark or, as Evan is saying, authentic, realistic? I don't even really know.
I don't even know. I wouldn't. But it comes down back into the things that they switched out and moved around, where it's like that love triangle is very interesting. And it could have added a lot, and it could have, and the mom that doesn't exist, that could have added so much dynamicism to this. I don't know. It's really difficult because we don't trash things here, and we don't rag on things here, but it's
and also the unfairness of like, this is the first time something like this is happening.
Yes, this
It's
has
not-
so
it-
much more unfair scrutiny because it is
Yeah.
a movie about minorities, that it hogs the conversation, and it really detracts from what is kind of going on here. And it is unfair, but that's part of the reckoning. That's part of the growing pains that we have as an audience who's going to be intaking these things, is we've got to reckon with this. And that's what I see in their interviews, because their press junket has been destroyed by this controversy. But the director, John Imchu, he is taking it on his shoulder and going, hey, let this be the example to get it right the next time. Now it is evident. We show, if this is a problem, now it is out there in the open, and you have your choices made for you next time. So I really appreciate that about this, but it gets down to another conversation, of which I think that the problems are not too specific on one aspect or the other, but there is a swirl of problems here that add to this inauthentic feel. And it's a bit of a shame, and it maybe is a bit of a shame that it is dragging, like I said, that it is dragging the focus here, and not just thinking about maybe what this did right.
Right. On a positive note, it's like, good Lord, a music, a mainstream musical film.
Right. It is not hollow. It is not everything yet. It's very interesting. Let us know what you think about this, because there's no clear answer for this. Nobody's wrong.
And maybe that's the unfortunate thing. Like you said, everybody wants the expectation, or it was marketed as, hey, this is everything.
Right.
And I like the way you said, where it's like, oh, it's not everything. Like, well, but that's okay too.
Right.
Like, is that the fault of musical films? Is people want everything. They want romance. They want music. I think
people are quick to point fingers and go, you did this. And I'm like, I actually think that it has a lot of problems, a lot of complex problems, in which I see easily could have fallen into people's blind spots while making this.
Well, let us know, please. Reach out to us at ILLITERATE-POD.
What did you like about it? Did you like it? I don't know. I wasn't the biggest fan of it, but I certainly appreciate it for what it is. Let us know if you liked it. If you didn't like it, what were your problems with it? What did it do right? What did it do wrong? We would love to hear from you.
At ILLITERATE-POD on Instagram. Send us a message. Thank you so much for listening.